Welcome to Scramble Game Show. We are now in a season that's probably less stressful for our studio because our election process is over and you have voted for your desired public officers and so forth, and we are very happy. Our county executive has won the election and had 4 more years to serve us. Certainly had done a very good job, and we are happy Rob Astorino is re-elected. Now, after the election, we go back to our game show, but today, instead of a game, we still have another interview we have scheduled before. This interview is going to be very interesting. It's unusual. It's not politics. It's not our usual educational topic or text topic, but it is a topic on human intelligence. As you know, everyone, whatever you do, you require intelligence to succeed. So talking about human intelligence actually is very key for every person to understand what's your potential. And how do you use your intelligence so that you can achieve the maximum, optimum goal of your life? Okay, so let's welcome our guest, Dr. Robert Flower. Hey, Robert. Yeah, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Yeah, you have been on the show before, but I think we'd like to talk to you again. Particularly, I understand you now sort of focused on trying to create a group to explore the concept that you have laid down in your books that we introduced before.
Right.
In fact, this is probably your latest book, right?
Yes.
And this book titled, How We Analyze, Understand, and Decide Things, right?
Correct.
And certainly it relates to the human intelligence. So today, we're going to sort of make our 1 hour into 3 parts. A bit of a review about the conceptual part that you talked about before, but we want to review that so that our audience would have a little background. And then in those sort of a conceptual topic, we'd like to have some examples to illustrate how these things really work in real life, particularly with a real person. And then we talk about a little bit about your effort and in your local community, which is essentially the whole county, Westchester. What do you hope to accomplish? Is that okay?
Sure, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah. Yes.
So.
Yes.
To start with, I think we should get some nomenclatures over, and we might have some slides that can be superimposed as caption on the screen.
Okay.
First of all, this NATI is key, right?
Yes.
Natural intelligence.
Right.
Right. I think we can flash on NATI, the subtitle, if you can hear me. Natural intelligence is terminology probably can be considered as a very generic term, but you have used it in your specific definition to sort of include 13 elements of intelligence.
Yes.
But in the say, call it layman language or a common language, when people talk about natural intelligence, basically it's the word intelligence to the key. Whether it's natural or not natural, that's somewhat philosophical. Sometimes, unless you get into biological or medical type of interpretation, natural, not natural is very hard to define, okay? Because we all learn, and the learning process gain intelligence. Intelligence enhance learning. So this whole continuous loop really make one sort of a develop your intelligence. So from a baby onward, okay, early days you would say, what's natural intelligence? Well, people say, well, it's just the way the baby smile, you can see she's intelligent, right? Yeah. Or the eye movement and so on. So as human grow and the intelligence expands, and that process itself certainly involves some natural elements, but also incorporate all the environmental effects and all the other things that are sort of cast upon the person, right?
Well, not quite. First off, the reason why I call it natural intelligence, there's two connotations to the term I use in natural. One is that it's what I discovered, these 13 intelligences are natural to the human host. Right? The second, and probably more important, is the way I discovered it was from the natural sciences. I'm a general systems scientist, and what general systems scientists do is they take principles of nature, principles of biology or chemistry, whatever, and they adapt those principles, those factors, those fundamentals, to human behavior. And that's why I call it, those are the two reasons why I call it natural. They blend together. So that's number one. So these intelligences were gleaned from science, and we call them absolute because of the fact that we do have them, and we use them every single day of our lives, but we don't understand them, and we don't know how they work. So what I'm trying to do for the past 33 years is hone this down to a concept that people can grasp a lot easier than on the scientific realm. My first book, which was called Decoding Potential, took me 4 years to write that book, and it's loaded with science, the science of potential, how I came to discover this and why I feel that these are absolute factors. But then after that, the next 3 books came a lot easier because I was then able to take that concept, that language, and hone it down to everyday reality. Okay, and as you had on the screen, the creative, the organizational, and the functional. These are the 3 segments of the 13 intelligences. Right. And there was actually a cell that this geneticist friend of mine, award-winning geneticist, had discovered, which was actually based on the geometry of cellular development. I use that to configure this whole concept, and I continue to use it every day when I'm doing analysis, decision-making, problem-solving, conflict resolution, to the point where it can apply to anything. It can apply to the gal that's having a relationship problem. It can apply to the businessman who's having a problem marketing something, perhaps, or is having some financial difficulties. To the athlete, I've worked with a number of different athletes, professional athletes. So it's a universal application.
Okay. Well, let's back a little, because I think for the audience's sake, probably we need to go back a little bit. This natural intelligence, in your description, there are 13 elements.
Yes.
And 13 elements was grouped in 3 sort of categories.
Yes.
The first category called creative intelligence.
Yes.
The creative intelligence that consists of 3 elements. That is focus.
Awareness, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Or awareness is
right.
Or belief.
Concepts, yes.
Or concept.
Right.
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 And communication.
Yes.
Right.
Your
Expression.
Yes. Right.
So that's the the creative part. You say that's the, and then the second category is organizational.
Yes.
Where it seems to me at this point, it also includes the way intelligence is applied, is used. So this organizational one, I think you have to help me out. There are 6 elements, right?
Yes, yes.
The first one is
models, laws, or rules. Sure.
Get this,
Sure.
I can't memorize them. The reflection.
Reflection is another.
Systems, right?
Yes,
Systems.
systems.
Models.
Right.
Evaluation.
Yes.
Details.
Yes.
And synthesis.
Yes.
And that's why I said it's the way you use the process the intelligence is applied is sort of grouped in this, happen to be the word organizational is a good term.
Yes.
It is organizational in this process.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So that's 6 elements plus the first 3, that's 9.
Right.
And the third category is you called functional.
Functional.
Which actually includes physical, emotional, mental, emotional, and intuitive. Right. So the last group is a little bit abstract sometimes because emotional intelligence or mental intelligence, it's not as concrete as you can define in these first 2 categories.
Right.
But yet they're functional because eventually the action, the behavior, the decisions human make is definitely related to this. Okay, the physical, mental, intuitive, emotional intelligence.
Right. It's how you take action in your life. And there's only 4 possible ways you can take action in your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, or intuitively, as we say. That's it.
Right.
You can do combinations, but there's only 4.
Yeah. Since this is very critical, later on lead to our discussion and so on, let's expand a little bit. The physical part is probably the easiest to understand. For example, let's say take a sports figure person, a baseball batter or pitcher.
Right.
He's able to pitch the ball 99 out of 100 times in a way that is, sort of curved. Let's say that's a very it's a skill. We are now sort of getting into that gray area. What's intelligence? What's develop the skills. That ability is physical.
Yes.
Right.
So is a surgeon also.
Well, surgeon, precision, and so on.
Right. Yeah.
So that part. Now, the mental part, then you can say, well, can we take some examples of people like say, you have a excellent preacher. Although I know in this part of the discussion we really don't want to get into the religion aspect, but it's just say a great philosopher or teacher or person that is able to influence another person in a way that I think is that mostly out of this mental intelligence?
Well, mental is basically IQ. The intelligence quotient that the people's memories, how good they are at figuring things out. That mental, by mental we really mean IQ.
Yeah, but the IQ is a test, is a sort of a yardstick, but it's not so accurate in a sense. But in general, between people, let's say, when a person respects another person for his or her intelligence, is that yardstick is working, but it's not quite, quantitative. It's through mental, in a sense that sometimes just meeting with another person without a word, without speaking a word, and you will say, well, you show respect to this person. Just out of somehow a person can, project themselves, and by looking at you, right, and you have eye contact, you develop that sort of a relationship. Sometimes can be positively respect, and sometimes can be negatively.
Well, sure.
Right?
Yeah, because they all have a positive, negative. I guess you could say, it's reason and logic would be the mental,
Yeah. And of course, once you engage conversation, so on and so forth, exchange of things,
Yes.
and that mental process is really, really flooded in.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the emotional part, how do you, sort of
The emotional part is the feeling part. One who demonstrates or initiates feelings towards their existence or their situation. It's a desire, motivation, but it's also fear. Right? Emotion has those different qualities to it, but it's the ability to utilize your emotions while controlling them. Right? That's the key with emotional intelligence. Being able to control oneself when, for instance, they're being attacked or they're under heavy scrutiny
now,
or something.
How is this sort of exhibited in some way? For example, let's say people love animals. For some reason that the certain people can, emotionally bonded in a way because they all love dogs or cats or some, things, and they express that love through emotions. Some people won't go near a animal, and some people would love to pet every kitten pass along. So that kind of interaction is not in the realm of a reasoning, because we're not using the mental part to say to reason them ourselves. I must love dog. I must love cat. It's just come natural.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of integrating emotional intelligence with one of the organizational intelligences that you talked about, which is feedback. All right. Let's take a situation where somebody comes up to me and we're talking and they say something insulting, okay? Where my emotional intelligence and my feedback intelligence come into play here would be, in a positive sense, would be where I am capable of controlling my emotions so that I don't fire back and start getting name calling or insulted or whatever. So that's my emotional intelligence coming into play. My feedback intelligence is saying to me, don't take this personal. Look at what this person is saying. Maybe they're giving you a message about yourself that you should hear. Okay? So that's an example not only of the emotional intelligence and the feedback intelligence, but how these intelligences work together daily.
Fine. I can understand the sort of distinction or elements. Certainly, their interplay, but the emotional part is a natural response that relates to one's emotions, feelings, right?
Their feelings.
And
yes.
that's why I say, let's say you are walking a dog and somebody else come along, pat your dog, without saying a word, somehow you feel warm towards each other because it's just warm to your feelings, right?
Yeah.
Or two people watch the same movie and the same scene, somehow a person will have a certain expression in the creative part of the intelligence, and that expression somehow is similar.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and
that part.
I think you could add to that. Lovers have a chemistry.
Yeah.
Right, which is what the motion is.
Yeah,
it's a feeling.
Chemistry is really when the feelings are, sort of working together, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, so that's the emotional part. The intuitive part actually is quite easy to understand because every person does have some intuition some way. It's not exactly described in terms of the physical or mental or emotional part. It just that I guess you can use some examples that in a dialogue or interaction with another person, that a certain intuitive response may come along without your switching your brains into a reasoning, in terms of analysis or synthesis or feedback or so on. It just comes along, right? Sometimes that intuitive part can be closer to the emotional part. That's usually happen because I think the emotional part and intuitive part is the part that sort of not go through a rigorous brain power processing. For example, two people and meet and somehow have hug each other and so forth, and the intuitive response comes. You just haven't seen each other for a long time. You naturally hug each other. That is closer to the emotional part,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yet that response, I would say, is quite intuitive in the sense you don't hug another person if you meet person every day, and it's just, when you haven't seen each other for a long time, that somehow just happens. Right?
Well, the difference between emotional intelligence and intuitive intelligence is this. Emotional intelligence deals with feelings. Intuitive intelligence deals with sensing. And people kind of get that mixed up. You hear people often say, I had a gut feeling about that. And then they turn out to be wrong. Well, that's because they're using their emotions rather than using their intuition. Now, don't forget, Socrates said that intuition is pure reason. Right? It's a much deeper level of understanding. It's almost like a wisdom.
When you say pure reason, when I just said before, is not went through the brain processing, it's you're relating to the raw part of the reasoning. I don't know how medical definition is for that mental process or the brain process. This raw part of a sort of reasoning is intuitive. That's basically a different.
Right. Yeah.
Certainly you can define it that way, but still it's not clear physically and medically. How do you this reasoning part of a process is a certain neurons already exist in your brains.
Well, it's curious that we should lead to this point, because this brings about a very critical point in my whole theory, my whole philosophy. You're exactly right. There isn't a science, there isn't a material description. And I think the reason for that is this, that as you probably know as a physicist, 92% of the universe is made up of a substance that cannot be defined. Astrophysicists, scientists do not know what the substance is and how it works. My contention, my research, says that substance is potential. That potential is actually a material substance that we do not see, we do not understand.
Well, physics do equate material and energy. Energy and potential is the same thing.
Right.
In that sense, yeah.
So this science has not been discovered yet. It hasn't been perfected yet. And the understanding of intuition, of course, is far from a science, as we know. Most of the times it can't be depended upon. It's very instinctual. But I contend that the greater your ability to develop your potential, the greater your intuitive skills are. And I have seen that not only in my own practice, but in people that I work with. They grasp things beyond them better.
Yeah. Well, this is the part I think, the reason I mentioned the brain process, the analytical process. It's more detailed, perhaps more prolonged, and more, sort of deliberately made. Yet, when people say intuition or intuitive, are the ones that somehow is the early stage of that process, or even before that process. And then when you say, oh, this person is very intuitive, actually sometimes it's possible that the process leads to analytical reasoning and so forth. The initial part is more powerful than other person in a way. It's like physically, when people say compete in running, the first sprint, some are so good at it.
Yes.
Just dash right out.
Yes.
And another person could be later on catch up, and he's got more physical power and eventually actually overtake.
Sure.
But the intuitive part is the part that is somehow just that initial burst. So how is that initial burst is really based on? That's where I think is, it's very hard for people to pin it down. It's not totally independent or void of a person's knowledge, other intelligence, IQ, and so on. I can intuitively say the more knowledge you have, the more IQ you have, perhaps more intuitive you'll be.
I think that, that's entirely possible, but I'll tell you what my research finds is it has more to do with understanding than it does with knowledge.
The understanding is the knowledge part, though.
Well, okay, if you extend knowledge into understanding, because there's a vast distinction there.
Right.
Now you're talking more on the intuitive level.
Right.
Knowledge, you're talking about the mental part. Understanding, you're coming to the intuitive part.
Right.
Okay?
So this is a good discussion, because I want to lay this, or let the audience get sucked into this discussion, so that maybe later on, when we follow with examples and so on, people will be able to understand better and appreciate better.
Right.
So we now cover sort of the NATI in a not a short time, but it's the essence, the 13 elements, right?
Yes.
3 categories: creative part, organizational part, and functional part.
Yes.
And the creative part we haven't talked too much, but I think it's easier to understand. The focus, awareness, the
beliefs,
that concepts that you sort of grasp, and then communication or expression. This part people definitely use daily, right?
Sure.
So this intelligence, how does one sort of differentiate? You have more or less. I mean,
yes.
Can you say this person is more focusing or has the ability to focus? That definitely means he has more intelligence in the focusing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
right.
if the person has a strong belief, however is accomplished or however is developed, versus another person who doesn't have strong belief in one thing or another, or always have self-doubt, right, of any concept, right?
Okay. I think, relative to the belief, we have to be cognizant here. Concepts are a better term
than beliefs in this.
Your ability to understand concepts, because beliefs get you in trouble.
Yeah, particularly religious part.
Yeah. or political, right?
Yeah.
I try and tell people that my own process when I came to all of this was to disavow any of my beliefs, all beliefs. Work on perceptions, work on what facts came to me, And it became such a strong base that's what eventually led me into this discovery. But yes, beliefs. It's more concepts than it is beliefs, and like things like visualization. Being able to see things and then make them happen. And we have a little formula that we use with the creative. We call it the A plus B equals C. Awareness plus your beliefs will always equate to your communication, how you communicate it. This is a very, very simple, basic rule for solving problems and for conflict resolution. Because what we do is we look at those three elements. If somebody comes to us, a couple, or business partners, and they're having conflict, that's all we have to look at. What are you communicating, and what are you communicating? What is your belief about it, and what is your belief? And what are you really focusing on? What is behind what you're focusing on? And once you deal with those three, with the two parties, the differences are glaring, and the resolution really is at hand. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I mean, I've had people come into my office, and in 15 minutes, they understood each other on a totally different level that they hadn't before. So,
but that's probably on the premises that people are not having this belief or concept ingrained so deeply becomes inflexible. I mean, there are also, your example, there can be people coming in and just never be able to communicate or understand each other because they have such